Big political parties that fill up stadiums aren't the only ones contesting Wednesday's poll. A record 48 political parties are in the running, all of them determined to claim your vote, and that's who we are speaking to this evening. Strike Tukwane Azapo made a rather curious move in this election. You decided to take up the issue of Abatembu King Dalindyebo.
I think that was very clever of us. But also, it is what I call the right thing to do. That of all the people who have done wrong things, including those in the ruling party, it is decided that King Dalindyebo is kept in prison. But we also think that in the African culture, you also respect kingship. When the king has intervened on behalf of his communities or of his tribes people, you don't use the instruments of modern legality to deal with him.
But someone died there.
Yes,
another person.
No, that's why he deserved.
He hasn't been able to regain his normal senses.
It's true. He went to prison for that. But we are saying, in as much as you have been able to give pardon to criminals, hard criminals, we can negotiate that he be released and probably do compensation for the family. But we think it is very important that a tribe or a nation is their king is taken away from them. But it's only not for politicking, because we began to do this thing way back before the elections came around. And we think we'll continue to campaign. And this is also derived from talking to the traditional leaders, because we have been in consultation with them about the whole area of kingship, and when such things have happened, how should the nation treat its people?
Quite interesting that an organization that is socialist in orientation would care about such things first.
Yes, when you are socialist, you also care about your people. You don't only go for instance, I'll give you the idea of kingship versus the idea of councillors and so on. I think when it comes to that, we might have to actually consult and do a referendum on our people, because we have not reached a stage where we're actually running a socialist country, but we are building towards a system of socialism that in the end, that's where we want to go. But don't leave casualties on the way when you want to go towards socialism. There'll be lots of things that can go wrong, because we are living in a capitalist state and we're educating our people to live. Remember what Steve says. He says, in as much as black people have learned to live under apartheid system, they got to learn to live under a socialist type of system. So this is a build-up towards that. And in the process, in the meantime, in the march, there'll be those gaps which must be closed. And this is one of those gaps that are closed.
Wayne Thring, you don't think that your version of Christianity could perhaps be the inhibiting factor? In other words, it's alienating a lot of people who may just regard your views as being very conservative and not progressive enough for the kind of country that this country has been trying to build over the past 25 years.
Absolutely not. I think that, let me firstly say that we are unapologetically Christian. Christianity defines us. It guides us. It gives us a value system by which to live. So we offer no apology for who we are. We are Christian. But being Christian does not mean that we are not able to influence, that we are not able to interrogate, and that we are not able to meaningfully contribute to South Africa, which the ACDP has done from 1994 to date. Let me give you 3 examples. When the ACDP, our MMC in the Nelson Mandela Bay, was inducted in Nelson Mandela Bay, he managed to revolutionize the park industry, the park areas, by taking rubbish dumps and turning them into play fields for children, and won awards for the city of Nelson Mandela Bay. In the city of Johannesburg, our MMC there for human settlements was able to issue 1,000 title deeds in a matter of a month or so, where his predecessor took some 10 years to give out 6 title deeds. In the city of Tshwane, our MMC there in the cooperative governance that we have saved the city of Tshwane some 60 billion rand. Wherever the not 62 billion rand. wherever the ACDP has influence, it has influence which is meaningful. So I don't hear also, Vuyo, I don't hear anyone saying to, for example, the Socialist Party, you know, socialism is, it is offensive to Christians. Or for those perhaps who are communists, you know, communism is offensive to Christians. So why should in Christianity or those who hold fast to the Christian faith in any way feel undermined or smaller than any other group? In fact, it should be just the opposite. South Africa is some 80% of South Africans confess to be Christians. And so if anything, the values of Christians ought to be reflected in our constitution. It ought to be reflected in our daily lives. And Christians should not feel as if they are under threat, as some actually do today with regards to the CRL attacks on the church. I think that there are some. I think that certainly there are some, particularly if you speak to those within the church. We've had the CRL that is supposed to be for the promotion and protection of cultural, religious, and linguistic rights. But there are many who feel where CRL wishes to regulate on behalf of the state, regulate the church on behalf of the state. And there are many who feel that the church is coming under attack. There are many who feel that the values which are held dear are also are being ignored. And very clearly, some of the moral issues. But let me say this also, Vuyo. The ACTP is not just about moral issues. We are
you've made that point about
moral
the things
issues,
you say.
but our policies are very strong. Okay. And News 24 did a survey. Some 70 to 80%, a blind survey, 70 to 80% of those who participated in that survey identified with the policies and the manifesto of the African Christian Democratic Party.
It's interesting. It would be interesting to know why they don't vote for you then, if those indeed are the values that drive. But I'm going to ask you to stop right there. I'm going to go to Nana. Nana Ngobese, I mean, there are a lot of people who agree with many of the issues that you are raising, but who are just not convinced that basing a whole political party on those things is perhaps the way to go. What do you say to that?
Vuyo, I would actually say until people realize that the majority of the people who are poor in this country, the people who need most of the services that government offers are women. And most of them sit in the margins of decision making. Then they're actually going to be convinced that we need women to actually come in and be part of the decision making, because when some of the decisions are made, they are made without their input, and it impacts on their lives. And we know that 67% of the people who are poor in this country are women, and they sit in the margins. So just look even at the panel we actually have right now. It's just one woman, and we know that women are majority, in this country. So the reflection of those numbers leaves a distaste in many people's thinking, to say, if people actually were to do things themselves, would they continue blaming others? Let women become part of decision making. Therefore, then we are going to start seeing a different outcome from what we actually see on a daily basis. When there's problem with electricity, it's not that the electricity is off. It's the fact that women cannot cook. It becomes dark. It becomes less safe for women to walk in the streets. There are so many things that are impacted by the services where women are actually feeling disadvantaged. Therefore, I don't see why anyone would not see the logic of actually saying, when women get involved, things might actually get even much better than they are right now, because they are in the majority. But more than anything else, they look after the children, they look after the families. And I think it's important for us to actually bring that into decision making, even in corporate South Africa. We actually have to make sure that we bring women's voice in there so that we start seeing things differently. We cannot continue in this trajectory where women are actually left out and think that things are going to get better. Things are only going to get better when we use the very resource, their human resource, that is underutilized. And their views are very important in making the society better. We have seen that in the Nordic countries where women have actually become decision makers. Things have improved not just for the women themselves, but for the whole country at all levels of the society. And I don't see why it cannot actually impact the same way in South Africa, the way it has actually happened in the Nordic countries. And I think South Africa has an opportunity right now to bring in not just women, but young women who are very vibrant in thinking about how things can can be resolved in this country. But for a long time, we continue using the old model of actually making sure that the men are the ones who actually make decisions. Women are just brought in as numbers to actually celebrate those decisions without interrogating what the consequence of those decisions are. And I think it's important from here onwards for us to realize that, not say realize, we know that women are leaders because they are the ones who have brought us here. They are the ones who have actually worked so hard with little money, little budgets to get the families going, but they've actually produced the people that you actually have in this country. So why not put them in decision-making positions where the rand will go further than what it has actually done? And women will actually hold each other more accountable than men have actually done in the past few years.
Okay, Thembakoti, now you were helped a great deal by the position you occupied in Parliament as leader of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, which of course something or a position you got by virtue of the ANC deciding to give the position to somebody else. How successful do you think you would have been in raising your profile in Parliament if that was not the case?
Well, in the first instance, I must express my appreciation for the opportunity I've had to chair the Public Accounts Committee and to champion accountability. I'm sure, as you know, there were many, many other chairpersons of that committee before me. Well, I'm not sure if they are as well known as I am, meaning you don't just get into a position and that automatically places you in a higher pedestal. It's a lot of work.
Well, you don't think it's a combination of what you had and other people who came before you had, but an added advantage this time around was how Jacob Zuma and some members or MPs of the ANC actually behaved?
Well, my point is that, yes, I got the position and I held it for 14 years, very long time. But I'm saying that there was a lot of work, dedication that went into it. Now, surely that position did give one a particular profile. If I wasn't chairperson of SCOPA, I'm sure that my approach to parliamentary work would have been different. To what extent it would have elevated my position, we can only speculate. But what I'm clear about is that when I go back to Parliament, if I'm not chairperson of SCOPA, I'm certain that I'll engage with accountability from a different angle and be able to find a niche from which to promote accountability and to seek especially accountability for public funds. Because even if I'm not chairing SCOPA, what I've learned from SCOPA is that if we don't take care of public funds, whatever policies, whatever programs government has will come to zero because there will be no money for those programs to be implemented. Okay.
This conversation, of course, continues. We're speaking to a group of political parties that are contesting Wednesday's election. This conversation continues. Don't go away.